If you grew up without consistent love and safety and validation from your parents, you've probably already noticed how vulnerable you are to the idea of a great love that just shows up in your life. Like, there's ordinary people who are actually in your life, and maybe you're single, maybe you have a partner, but there's this other hypothetical relationship in your imagination, and it's just legendary. It's beyond what other people normally experience. It's a perfect union kind of love. And you have a deep sense of what that feels like for you to be loved for who you really are, to be safe, and to be certain that you are in the right place, in the right relationship, in the right life. And chances are you have someone in your mind who feels like they are that person for you. And chances are they aren't actually with you. Now, these are the perfect growing conditions for what we call limerence, which is a state of infatuation or obsession that people with CPTSD can be especially prone to. It can happen to anyone, but with trauma and neglect in childhood, it just seems to get a real foothold sometimes. So sometimes you're going to get limerent feelings for someone you're acquainted with, sometimes it's someone famous or imaginary, and sometimes it's someone who is actually in a relationship with you, but in a limited way that leaves a big empty space for that obsessive waiting, hoping, searching obsessively for clues and evidence that they love you that often goes with limerence. So I got a letter yesterday from someone I'll call Lisa, and she writes, "Dear Anna, my first marriage was 32 years ago with my best friend ever, or at least I thought so. Mike and I were so connected in so many ways I didn't expect that I was in love with him until I was. It took 1.5 years for us to recognize that, become a couple, and get married. It was great, but then it wasn't. He was doing drugs, and I had to make him leave," Lisa says. "I was devastated, and it seemed he was too. He was sobbing his brains out, yet didn't want to go to rehab. He didn't want to do the work to keep us together. I came from a nightmare home with screaming, verbal abuse, physical abuse. Mostly my mom and brother got the physical abuse. What I did was hard-hearted, as everyone seemed to observe. Mike was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was so crushed, confused, and broken, but I recall saying to myself, I can't be like my mom and stay in an unhappy situation. So I did what I had to do, and we split." Got my pencil here, and I'm circling things I want to come back to when I go through this letter again. But let's just read through now. "I remained in touch with Mike's parents, especially his mom. After our divorce, he was married 2 other times and divorced 2 more times. His mom used to fill me in here and there, but he was not our main topic. We were actual friends with other stuff to discuss. I never saw Mike after the divorce because he moved to another city, and that was that. As soon as the internet became a thing, I searched for him on a regular basis, even though I was with a new boyfriend to whom I eventually got married. It took me 5.5 years to agree to marry him, and when I did, it was because I needed his health insurance so I could return to school. My new husband and I did have fun through traveling, having lots of friends and a lot of socializing. Still, I searched and thought about Mike on a regular basis. I don't feel this was normal, but I could not stop myself," she says. "After about 25 years, Mike's dad died. I asked his mom to please ask him if it was okay if I attended services. She said no need to ask, but I didn't want to feel intrusive. The day came, and at the service, Mike and I saw each other. We hugged and cried for what seemed like an hour. It was very emotional. His latest girlfriend was there, and we were introduced. It was all laughs and a great to see you kind of vibe. He asked if we could be in touch on social media, and I agreed. We never talked after that, but would occasionally like each other's pet photos and little things like that. Very generic. But I was secretly thrilled to know this guy again, my first and biggest love. The funniest, smartest person I've ever known was back, even if it was just via social media. So 2 years later, Mike's mom died, and he messaged me directly, and from that point we became reconnected. talking and laughing, and he apologized profusely about drugs and ruining our marriage. He even had a tattoo of us on his arm. I was a bit freaked out by that, but loved it, of course. All of this communication led to meetups, and I'm skipping ahead a bit, she says, or this will go on forever. The meetups led to a first kiss and then an affair. He was now engaged to the girl I had met, and I was still married. We both seemed to love every moment. Then he decided to get an advanced degree for a new career, and it all slowed down, but we still communicated almost daily. Just nothing about hooking up. It was mutual and equal. Then it wasn't. I could feel the pulling back on his end, but we continued on, discussing school, jobs, sports, and always music, which was our biggest bond. It's now been 2 years since we've seen each other. I go to therapy and he goes to class. It's been almost 3 years that he's been engaged. She is loaded and his keeper, if you will. Even after many times of him saying it'll never end until one of us is dead, he's slipping away. I know it and he knows it. The problem is that I cannot stop thinking or obsessing over him. I know it's affecting everything in my life. Although my husband doesn't know, I'm sure he can tell part of me is gone. I watch every video out there, go to therapy, speak to certain friends that know the truth. Nothing stops me from thinking about him. I'm obsessed and I do not want to be. I will always love him because I loved him, but I'm never going to have him. Am I so bored in my marriage, or am I traumatized once again by this ex-husband and due to my crappy childhood? I have always missed Mike, and our fling just makes me miss him all over again. It's ridiculous and I feel ridiculous. I do not regret our time together, but I need to make my brain stop because he's stopping, and I'm now trying to stop reaching out. I even sit on my hands, so I do not message him. He calls occasionally, and we still text, but I need to stop waiting and living just to hear from him, and I can't. My therapist said it's because of my miserable childhood and not getting my needs met then. She says this is a trauma bond. She's right, you're right, but how do I make it stop? He can reach out, that's fine, but I need to stop living for it. He doesn't want me back. In the beginning, I was the one in control, and he wanted to know where I was and why he hadn't heard from me every 5 seconds. But that quickly turned, and now, alas, here I am, lonely and longing for any bit of attention from him. Please help if you can. From Lisa. Oh, Lisa, I'm so sorry. This is one of the most painful things in life. And right now, the options that you're facing are all painful. But I'm going to help you find the right way through, okay? I circled a bunch of things on your letter here that I wanted to come back to. All right, so I believe you're in your 50s now. So your first marriage was 32 years ago, and Mike had been your best friend ever. And then you fell in love, and you were married, and it was really great at first, but then it wasn't. And the only thing you say about what was great then was, it was great, but then it wasn't. That's a really short statement. Okay, and the reason was because he was doing drugs, and you didn't really say whether he had been using drugs the whole time and you just realized it, or he got into drugs, or what happened there. But I know firsthand how devastating it is to love somebody who turns out to be using drugs, and that it is an impossible situation. And he didn't want to go to rehab, and he didn't want to do the work to keep you together. Okay, so clue number one about Mike is not just that he was an addict and ruined your marriage, but he didn't want to do the work to keep you together. All right, and this shows up again later, so here we go. All right, and then you explain, and my heart goes out to you, you come from a nightmare home with screaming, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and mostly your mom and brother got the abuse. That was how it was in my family too. What I did, you say, was hard-hearted, as everyone seemed to observe. Hold on a second there. I actually think leaving somebody who's addicted to drugs and not willing to stop is not hard-hearted. It's common sense. It's common sense. You don't give a lot of details about this, but when I hear the whole story here of what happened, and I'm just going to take your word for it. He was an addict, and there is no happy relationship to be had with somebody who cannot stop using. And some people who are using can stop and they can heal, and it takes time, but he wasn't doing that. So I really think you did the right thing by getting out then, all right? But I can also see what it says to me, that you feel like you were too harsh, and I think that what got stuck in your mind is that you did it prematurely, that, you know, maybe you shouldn't have, that it was this great love. It ended up being so hard to find anything. And I believe that you guys loved each other. I get it. So then you say, Mike was the best thing that ever happened to you, okay? Well, okay, I'm just going to say, except that he turned out to be an addict and wasn't willing to do the work to be with you. And so, you know, I know that later you married somebody who does do the work to be with you. So I'm just going to sort of challenge that idea that this like wild child guy that you were with was the best thing that ever happened to you. What I'm hearing, and I totally understand, is that this relationship awakened a part of you that you don't ordinarily have access to. And that's a beautiful thing, and yet I suspect in people like you and like me what that is it's a trauma memory, and it's the satisfaction of a trauma wound with a fantasy. And as people with childhood PTSD, we sometimes have a really hard time telling the difference between what is a great love and incredible compatibility and what is something that has all the painful knife wounds of what happened to us as kids when it was terrible, and people could not do the work to honor us and treat us caringly, lovingly, in the way that we deserved, all right? You got that as a kid, you got that in your marriage. So I really question that it was the best thing that ever happened to you. I at least know that something much better can happen for you, okay? And you say, I was so crushed, confused, and broken. But I recall saying to myself, I can't be like my mom and stay in an unhappy situation. So I did what I had to do and we split. Now, I don't know if you noticed that, but you've done exactly what your mom has done. You are staying in an unhappy situation, in this limbo. And we're going to talk about your marriage in a minute. But I don't mean just instantly that that's the bad thing. Your limbo is a living hell. You're suffering and suffering every day. And you have been for a long time, okay? So you know I'm the tough love fairy, and I think on some level you kind of knew what I was going to say when you wrote. But if you don't know, I'm going to tell it to you with great love and great understanding and relatedness, because I've been through this too. So then you say, I remained in touch with Mike's parents, and since you had been married to Mike, that's not crazy, especially his mom. And then he got married twice and divorced twice, so he had had 3 marriages. By the time you ran into him, he's got a fiance for a 4th marriage. And, you know, hey, people with CPTSD, that's often what it looks like. So no judgment, but just saying he does have, in the way that he has relationships, he has this pattern of, you know, going in and going out, going in and going out. It's not working out. And that would be also extremely consistent with somebody who is an addict and very charismatic, all right? Some people are addicts and nobody would marry them because the drugs just blatantly make them awful to be around, but he's a charismatic addict. That's how I would describe it from the little you're saying. So his mom would fill you in here and there, but it wasn't your main topic. You had an authentic relationship with her. And you know, after the way you grew up, I totally understand holding on to the family that you once had when you were with Mike. All right. So you never saw him after the divorce because he moved to another city, and that was that. And good. There were 25 whole years between getting divorced and bumping into him again, and that's good boundaries. But as soon as the internet became a thing, oh, wasn't that a crazy couple of years for those of us who get limerent, right? As soon as the internet became a thing, I searched for him on a regular basis, even though I was with a new boyfriend to whom I eventually got married. And so you searched for him even though you were with a new boyfriend. It took 5.5 years to agree to marry this guy, and when you did, it was because you needed his health insurance so that you could return to school. Okay, so I think what you're trying to tell me is, but I never really loved this guy. But what you're accidentally telling me is something quite terrible, all right? You're exploiting somebody. But here's the thing. If you're going to be happy, Lisa, you cannot live in such a way that deeply deceives and hurts and uses other people. It just won't fly. It doesn't work that way. You can call it karma or you can call it inner peace, but you cannot have peace and you will not find love. Now, I'm not rendering judgment on this marriage. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But the fact that you're trying to tell me, oh, I just went into it for health insurance, that's just so morally wrong. And so going into it just for health insurance is sort of saying, I'm going to do something that looks like this conventional thing that people do called marriage, but I'm not really doing it. It's a material reason so that I can go to school. And if you grew up with trauma, I bet you your youth was extremely complicated. You didn't get that education really, or you couldn't be present for it, or you couldn't stay regulated enough to keep up with studies and move your career forward. And also the whole thing about money, like so many of us get financially hurt because of our trauma and because the families that we came from are so troubled. Like there is no money. And that's how I grew up. I got a little bit of money when my dad died when I was a teenager. It helped a little bit, but I was on financial aid. For a little bit I got Social Security benefits because my dad had died while I was a minor. I scraped together, and it took me a long time to finish college because I had to work, and I know what it is to have to scratch your way through survival, and how relationships play a role in that. And so I'm not standing here above you. I had relationships that I just needed so I had somewhere to live. I can see now how much what a soul-sucking thing that was for all concerned, that I hurt other people, that I couldn't be happy, that I was never free, that when I did meet really great men, I had weird stuff, complications going on in my life that made me not seem like an ideal match to them, and they weren't really interested. So, okay, so then you say your new husband and you did have fun through traveling. You had lots of friends, you socialize a lot, and you still searched and thought about Mike on a regular basis. And you didn't feel this was normal, but you couldn't stop yourself. So, yeah, that's when you have limerent tendencies, that's what you're going to do. Somebody comes along, and the idea that, you had this miserable existence before that was so terrible that you had to rip yourself out of a marriage to get out of it. But now it's going to be better. And that idea comes in, and that is what we do. That's how trauma distorts our thinking. And when it gets control over our lives, it takes us right off the tracks. So I'm here, I'm your tough love fairy, I'm just calling it for what it is. You got limerent, that's like an infatuation and obsession on somebody you're not actually with. Like if you were actually with him, the same old problems would manifest. And it's interesting in your whole letter, you never say whether he stopped using drugs. Maybe he did and maybe he didn't. But if that's not like a hugely significant fact about him, whether he's using or not, he's still in that addictive behavior. He's having an affair. He gets into an affair right after he gets engaged. Like, who does that, right? Who does that is somebody who has just as much fear and avoidance as you have. Some people do avoidance by, they just don't get into relationships. But some of us have this subtler way where we want the simulation of a relationship or a marriage, but we don't give ourselves to it. And limerence really comes in as a way to sort of take this huge piece of our heart and our love and our the thing that we have to give to another person. If it were to be for real, we were like, here, I'm going to direct that over here, and then with this person, I'm going to have this limited thing. And some people will criticize it and say, oh, it's a strategy so that you don't get hurt. I don't think it's conscious. It's not my experience that it's anything conscious. It's, it's just like, I can't help feeling like I need to eat food every day. I can't help feeling like I need to breathe every day. And there's a lot of behaviors that we can't help. They come so naturally to us because they're just wired in there. But while we do have to breathe and eat every day, we actually can change these behaviors. We can work on that brain level. We can work on the cultural level, the social level. We can heal these CPTSD symptoms. So take heart, all right? There is a way out of this. There's a way out of this hell and into peace and happiness for you, and something that feels good and just organically good for your life, all right? It's here for you. And so I'm going to go through the letter and find it, okay? I know where I'm going with this. Okay. So then Mike's dad died. and he contacted you directly. Or no, the mom contacted you, and you came and you saw him, and you got into the affair. So yes, we started talking about the affair. You were thrilled to know him. So what's interesting is when you first saw him, he was with a girlfriend, and everything was like, hey, great to see you, we're friends, we're introduced. So right away, everybody goes into a fake persona, or at least you do. I can't really speak for the other two. Surely this girlfriend has been jealous and upset about you. I mean, unless she's completely high all the time and doesn't feel anything, she's noticing there's something going on, right? So you see him and you're thrilled, but everybody pretends, oh yes, we're just friends, we used to be married, hi, how's it going? And then he says, can we stay in touch? And yeah, that's not like crazy to stay in touch after 25 years. It seems like everybody can be friends. But the energy, the electric energy that you were feeling, probably he was too, and especially because he's an addict, that's my experience, that these things, like sometimes we're just tripping in our own mind, but sometimes both people feel them. And the fact that he entered into an affair with you means he was feeling it. So I don't doubt there was a real love between you and a real connection, and that even 25 years, like you could feel it right away. But oh, why is life like this? Sometimes the great love you feel is not compatible with daily life. And there it is, it's this great, thing that brings you out of yourself and helps you experience the eternal and feel connected with it and no union with another person. Except life with that person sucks. It can't be done. They won't do it. They can't do it. They have an addiction. They're with somebody else. And, he was only engaged, and I know you thought about this, Lisa, you didn't write about it, but he was only engaged. He could have broken that engagement, and he chose not to. So that was your clue, and it sounds like you were like, well, my marriage, I never was really feeling it, and I feel this, and maybe I can have both things. All right, you're certainly not the first person to give that a try. But just like everybody who's given it a try, you got into a place of great pain. And so another thing I wanted to say that was significant, I noticed that you had a lack of empathy for your husband. I noticed you have a lack of empathy for Mike's now fiance, that you have a lack of empathy for her. I just didn't hear you say anything acknowledging what she was going through. And so, you may have seen my video about how complex PTSD can give us narcissistic traits. And that's what happens. The need for love is so voracious and so consuming that it drowns out empathy for other people, ordinary empathy. And I think intellectually you must realize that this woman is something terrible has been done to her by you and by Mike, and it's still being done by you guys because he's still in touch with you and you're still, wanting him and hoping he'll leave. And what about her? So again, I've been in your shoes, but when you're in the middle of limerence, it's another sort of weird kind of brain state where you can't perceive the full spectrum of reality. And I'm just here outside your limerence just going, oh yeah, this is terrible. You're a good person, but you're doing a bad person thing that's really inconsiderate towards two people who are being robbed of something that they've been promised and that they showed up for in good faith, right? And that is just morally devastating. And there's just no way to really live your life that way and be happy. So I want you to take hope. It's like, there it is. And it's funny, like you've been in therapy all these years, and your therapist is talking to you about it, your friends are talking to you about it, and you say you're watching videos, but none of those things are doing anything about it. And I don't know if people are calling you out on the fact that you're not taking action on this. What I hear you doing is you're waiting for him to decide if he's going to, call you or give you a little bit of that, intense love that you are craving now. It is like an addiction, isn't it? It is, and it's the stuff that what it does to your life is just like what drugs do to a person's life. So I just keep going back, like you could not stay in an unhappy situation, so you did what you had to do and you split. And that's where you are right now. That's where we're going. So first we're going to deal with the matter of Mike. Okay. It's been 2 years since you've seen each other. You're going to therapy. He goes to class. He's still engaged. He still hasn't gotten married, and I'm not surprised. And I feel for that girlfriend. that fiance that he's having an affair on the whole time. You're very logical, you're very reasonable, I can tell you're a good person, but this one little bitter line comes out about Mike's fiance. She's loaded, meaning she has a lot of money, and she's his keeper, if you will. So that sounds like some envy that she has money and you don't, and that's why he's with her. And you might be right. You might be right. If it's any satisfaction, I don't think it's going to work out between them, given the way that he's treated her. And it sounds also exploitative. So you project that he's with somebody because he just wants the money, but just calling you out here, does that echo a little bit how you're with somebody also because you want the financial security? So we've got two people here who had a great love, but they were not spiritually ready for it. And when I use the word ready, I'm not trying to give you hope, because I think that this situation has been burned out too hard to call it back. A really good relationship can only take so much. And it has certain like rubber band qualities. A really good durable relationship, like real love, it has rubber band qualities in that, there can be hurts and it can come back, it comes back to its shape. But the stuff that you two have been through is so great. And because years went on with this like lying and hurting other people, my take on it is, this is too damaged. It's not only because he won't come back to you, it's because the good thing has been tainted by the toxic stuff. And it's so sad. But that can really happen, and that's why love is so precious. That's why caring for other people is something we strive so hard to learn how to do as people with CPTSD, because our traumatized behavior does spoil good and precious love, and that happens. But it doesn't have to anymore. You can make today the day that you don't do that anymore. Today can be the day that you clear it up. So you say you can't stop thinking or obsessing about him. It's affecting everything. Your husband doesn't know. I keep saying we're going to come back to your husband. He's very important in this. He can tell a part of you is gone. And I called this out before. You watch every video, you go to therapy, you speak to certain friends that know the truth. So I guess you had the idea that if you just kept talking about your feelings about him, that it would change. I used to think that too when I was in a situation that was a little like this. And I thought if I talked and talked and talked, I would pop out of it. But that's not what happened. You know what happened? It got worse and worse and worse. And it took on properties that were nothing like love. It was more like depression, self-attack, not wanting to live. It was terrible. And so, you know what the day that changed it for me is my friend who showed me the daily practice that I teach everybody. I mention it in every video. It's always down in the description section if you want to try it, but this is a technique. What I really needed was not to be obsessed on something that wasn't there. What I really needed was a way to find comfort and meaning and rest and clarity. That's what I really needed. And by a stroke of amazing good fortune, I met somebody who showed me these techniques where I could just get these horrible thoughts and feelings out of my head onto paper and then rest my mind. And it's 2 specific techniques. It's easy, it's free, you can learn it too. But that's what happened. And my friend taught me this. And then I said, I'm still really troubled about this relationship, so obsessed and can't let go. She was just like, oh, having any kind of contact that has romantic intent with a married person is wrong. And if you want to get happy now, cut it off. That simple, okay? And I literally, nobody had ever told me that who I'd gone to for help. Now everyone knows that. But I was being very selective, I think, about where I would go. And so I was going to this therapist, and we were drawing pictures about it and talking about dreams and, why was I sad and what was the last interaction like? And, this is a long time ago. But she had never said, and I guess I had really carefully picked friends who wouldn't challenge me, who would just say, cut it off. And when she said it to me, at first it struck me like somebody just took a sword and stuck it through my heart. And then I just realized, of course, that's it. And I did it. I cried for about 45 minutes. And then I felt so good. I felt free. Of course, that's what it is. You cut off contact with these people. So you'll hear me say this. We've been talking about limerence in other videos, and people who get stuck and their whole, your whole life, it's like pouring cement on the engine of your life to get stuck in something like this. It's so just life destroying. And there's a solution. And the first thing you do is you stop pouring cement on it. You stop having contact. So sometimes you need a friend like me to just get in there and say, let's look at it. Were you happy? No. When you were with him, you were miserable. Was he available to you? No. One of the hallmark signs of a relationship that's good and right for you is that that person can be with you and will be with you. And if they cannot or will not be with you, they are not the love of your life. They are not. They might be an ex-love, but they are not for you. And there it is. And I say that like in my really stern teacher voice because it just needs to get through. It needs to get through the fantasy of because when you are a kid and you're dealing with the abuse and the horrible stuff that you went through, it's so easy to think, right? It's like, yeah, Dad's hitting Mom and my brother all the time, but actually everything's okay. And then you go to school and everybody's like, well, how are you, Lisa? And you're like, I'm fine. And right? You get so good at that. I call it crap fit. You probably know that if you watch my videos. You fit yourself to crap. And you've been doing that all along. You've been fitting yourself to crap. And you've been trying to survive. You've been using crap fit to get by in the world. And so one little thing I want to put out there for you is if financial insecurity is a thing for you, whatever you do about your marriage, I really encourage you to get out there and get a way to make money and to have health insurance so you never again have to set up some fake relationship that you're miserable in so that you can have health insurance. I know how hard it is. It's crazy expensive, but it would be better to go on public assistance and get that kind of insurance, which is not ideal, I know, and a lot of hassle and paperwork. It's not ideal, but you still get to be a free person and not exploiting anybody else for your security, not deceiving anybody else. Oh yeah, your therapist says this is because of your childhood. It's like, yeah, but I just want to, yeah, obviously, your childhood, everything that's happening here is what we do. It's what happens to people with CPTSD. So I agree that it's because of that, but I don't know what came after that. You say you don't know how to make it stop. So since your therapist didn't tell you, here's what you do. You're not going to see Mike again, all right? If you want to use my technique here, don't see him again. You send him a text, if that's the safe way that you can communicate without harming ever again his fiance. Now, whether they work it out or not, that's no longer your concern. But you're not going to get in there to apologize. You're not going to try to explain anything, and you're not going to try to get closure. Closure is a fake word. It means opening, really, when you're addicted to somebody. So you go in there, so you send a text and say, I've thought about it, and I've realized that for my own mental health, I need to not have contact with you. This is goodbye, and I wish you the best. That's all you have to say. You don't even have to say, I wish you the best, but go ahead, just send that goodwill. And then what you do is you block text, calls, social media. And you can, social media lets you block people. As a person on YouTube, I know all about it. When people get yucky, I can block them. So you can block people. And if you have to change your number, change your number. Since he shows signs of being somebody who's in active addiction, either with substances and or in relationships, getting cut off by you could trigger a fake, this reaction of oh, gimme, and he might try to make contact with you. So for you to be strong for that, I'm just telling you, he may do that again, but it's going to be the same fake kind of interest in you that doesn't involve saying, I've realized I love you, I totally stopped using drugs, I got my life together, and I only want to be with you right now if you're willing to leave your marriage. If he didn't say that, and if anything he says now to try to keep the little dopamine thread going with you, because that's what it is, right? Life feels empty, and you can always send a little text and get that little, he called. And he's getting the same thing from it. And he makes contact when he needs a little lift, when he's feeling empty. All right? When a person loves you, they don't put you through this. This is such a hard video, isn't it, Lisa? And but I just want to be straight with you. It's not love when somebody does this to you, keeps you on a string and does not show up to be in your life and give you love. So you can have love. You can have it. And this brings us to the question of your husband. So you're in a marriage that what you're saying is not really a real marriage, that you got into it for financial reasons, and that you have friends together and you've had travel and it's fun, but you're not really feeling it. It may be that you got married under false pretenses and the right thing to do for his sake, and we really have to consider what's best for him, because getting married is making a promise to somebody. And sometimes we have to break that promise, but this requires careful thought. Whether you think that if you could detox from this addictive relationship you've been in, if you would like to give that some time to see if your feelings can blossom for your husband, I would totally back you on that. But it has to be a really clean thing. And whether you do that or whether you immediately exit the marriage, I'm really encouraging you to possibly change your therapist. I think therapy is a great idea, but if you had therapy for 2 years and you don't know how to make these things stop, which is just a tactical set of actions, if you don't know, I think you may want to get a therapist who's a little more experienced with love addiction and who can help you draw your boundaries and hold them and talk more about the boundaries and not the feelings that make you want to cross the boundaries. The feelings are going to be there. It'd be like if somebody were addicted to drugs and just wanted to go talk about the drugs all the time and how it felt to be high and how much you miss them, rather than, okay, what are you going to do to stay clean today, right? What are you going to do to stay away from the people who you know are going to be tempting to you? Let's make a plan. So those are the people you need. Friends too. So friends who really support that. One thing you can do, I have a dating course, and I feel like this is not the time for you to go dating, but what I want to call your attention to is that I start everybody out with writing down what they really want. What do they really want? And so you can start now writing that down, and as you detox and as your mind clears, you can keep updating that and to get clearer what you really want. But under no circumstances, I just know you don't want some guy who's like engaged to somebody else. Like, why would you want that, right? That's not what you want. So you can begin to just lay out there is something you want, and that can kind of help you endure the withdrawal that's going to come. It is withdrawal as you let go for good and make no more contact with this guy who's been life-sucking for you. You were doing okay, and then this came, and so now there's still time for your life to be happy. There's time for you to have a wonderful relationship. So your husband is stuck by you. Somehow he doesn't know. That's a little odd, because it seems like it might, anybody sensitive might know, but maybe you've been very good at hiding it. But I think that a therapist and friends could help support you over time to make a decision within 90 days if you're going to try to make it work with your husband or not. And he certainly deserves a chance as a person, but if you're not feeling it, then the most loving and honorable thing to do is to end that relationship. And I thought a lot about this question of whether you tell them what's been going on. That's a hard one. A lot of people are just like an automatic yes, tell, always, honesty. You can't have a good relationship without honesty. And so that's one that needs to be worked out with you and people you trust who know the details of the situation with you and your husband. But I will just say that if you do decide to be honest, it needs to be entirely limited to what needs to be said for him to understand the situation, that you have not been fully in the marriage, and either yes, you want to work it out with him, or no, you are ending the marriage. That it needs to be clear and not drag him into a chaotic, confusing, heart-wrenching thing. So for that's why I say I really encourage you to do this with a strong therapist, or perhaps consider going to a 12-step program for love addiction and getting the best sponsor in the room. Go to enough meetings, notice the woman who's really kick-ass, and ask her to sponsor you and to help you do this cleanly. The thing about CPTSD, and especially limerent thinking, is we can't think clearly for ourselves. We have to bring other people into the decision process. You can too, okay? You can do that. The other thing I'm going to recommend, whatever you decide to do or how to handle this, is try out my daily practice. You need a place to self-comfort. There needs to be a way to do that without resorting to texting him, thinking about him, talking about him. And did I mention that? Don't just not have contact with him. Don't think about him. Don't talk about him. And I know some thoughts are involuntary. They'll come up in dreams, but you can do this. If you have to like start training yourself. If you catch yourself thinking about him, have a go-to happy thought that you have instead. All right? And if you catch yourself talking about him, just pull back. And with your friends, just say, I'm trying not to talk about him. I think this is an extremely underrated technique for getting somebody out of your mind. Don't think about them. Don't talk about them. And so sometimes our friends and even therapists can enable us in continuing to stay obsessed by letting us talk about it, and as if that's going to lead to some breakthrough. If it hasn't led to a breakthrough by now, I mean, talking about it is necessary up to a point, but if you haven't had a breakthrough yet, I don't think it's going there. I don't think that's going there. What I see here is you need peace. You need a nice clean slate, sort of like somebody who walks into a river and bathes themselves and comes out on the other side and wraps themselves in a white robe, and just being safe and putting down and cleansing away all this stuff you've been doing to try to find love that's hurting you and hurting other people. And you'll find that when you're making a good and noble endeavor like this, the right people to help you will show up. And sometimes you'll just find that the wind is under your wings. You get help. You get help to get through the hard nights. There's going to be a lot of tears, a lot of feelings, because that's what addictions do, is they're helping us handle and suppress this well of pain we've got. And the interesting thing about pain is it's just sadness, it's grief, it's some anger. And especially if you have a comforting technique like the daily practice that I teach, it can just kind of come up and you cry and you feel mad and it just like rolls through you, and it's just a wave that passes. And then you have a quiet period where you can do the laundry, get a job, do the dishes, call your friend, get your nails done, whatever it is that's just daily life for you, right? So that's how it's done. You asked, how do I make it stop? And that is how. All right. So I just wish you every blessing and good luck, and I know you can do it. Now, for anybody watching this, if you think that childhood trauma has affected your ability to have relationships, I have a quiz that's about the symptoms of CPTSD related to how we get into and form romantic relationships. You might want to take that quiz. And if you want to see more about this kind of relationship and how we can draw boundaries on it, you can watch this video right here. And I will see you very soon.